Welcome to Living Freestyle. Video start kickoff. We're kicking off our skydiving series today. I found all of my skydiving stuff. And so you can see from my jumpsuit and my logbook that I thought it would be cool to talk a little bit about how I got into skydiving, why I think that you should potentially consider going off on your own skydive jump if you've never had a chance to do it, and just kind of launch off an intro before we get into some individual stories later on. So when I went to university, I went to Duke University. I love this because the first couple weeks at school, you're just like, yeah, you're meeting all these people. Hey, I'm so-and-so and la-di-da-di-da, and why'd you come to Duke? 90% of people, why'd you choose Duke? Why are you here? They all said basketball. Now, I had no idea what was going on with basketball. I thought it was weird. I was like, what is everybody smoking that everybody says basketball right now? Because my answer was, well, they have a skydiving club, naturally, and I thought that was pretty cool. So yeah, Duke had a skydiving club. The original university that I applied to, early decision, they had a ski slope on campus. Thankfully, I got rejected from that one, and I ended up at Duke because they had a skydiving club, which is cool. Now, unfortunately, when I got there, I found out that the skydiving club was being shut down. And so, before it got shut down, I had a chance to get in a couple of skydives. And then before I knew it, I found myself as president of the skydiving club. And so, from then on, I set about reviving the skydiving club. As president of the club, or starting any new club, you've got to get members, right? And how do you get members in a skydiving club? You throw them out of airplanes. So I spent the next 4 years throwing, it felt like half of Duke out of airplanes. Despite perception, Duke was fairly small. There was 4,000 undergrad and about 2,000 grad students. And I had a lot of fun. And I'm going to share some stories. As I was flipping through this, I thought, I just started laughing at some of the comments I had written down, and so I'll share some of the stories. But before I do that, let's just talk about how it was set up with the club, because skydiving was not cheap at the time, especially for college students. But because it was a club sport event, the university would subsidize the jumps. So your first jump back in 1995 was about $250 if you went tandem. So there's two ways to go. There's tandem or AFF, which I'll explain in a second. But with the subsidies, it was only $50, which still was expensive for a college student, but way more reasonable. Then once you get to your solo jumps, if you have all your own gear and stuff, it was with the subsidies, it was $2. So I spent the next 4 years skydiving for $2 a jump, which was awesome. I met a lot of really cool people as a result of being part of this club. And I'm so happy that I had the chance to do this, in addition to being able to skydive a whole bunch of times. So, and I know you're still probably wondering about the whole jumpsuit thing. We'll get to that in a second. First, let me just go through the quick little spiel that was kind of the thing that we always talked about whenever somebody new came up to the skydiving club table and we started talking. There's always the whole, well, isn't skydiving dangerous? What happens if this parachute fails? How does this even work? And all that stuff. So let's just break this down real quick. Okay. First off, safety-wise, there's all kinds of stats, but what did they say? 99% of all stats are wrong, which in and of itself is funny. Look, safety-wise, skydiving is, statistically, you'll hear that it's safe. There's a lot of cool stuff in place that makes it safe, but I also think that a huge part of whether or not it's a safe experience is whether or not you're jumping at a quality drop zone that has good procedures and everything in place. Fortunately, at the drop zone that we had was a rock solid operation. It was run really well. Safety was pretty darn key, and stuff like that. Then there's the individual safety mechanisms that happen. Whoa, what happens if your instructor gets knocked out and forgets to open the parachute? That can't happen because, your instructor could get knocked out. But the reason that's not a problem is while you're skydiving, there's a little device that's called, at the time it's called Cypress. It's kind of like your angel. And if you're falling at a certain speed and you start getting too low and you have not opened your parachute yet, your cypress will automatically open your reserve canopy, which gets us to the reserve canopy. Another big question always happens. What happens if the parachute doesn't open or opens and there's a problem? Well, it turns out you don't have just one parachute, you have two parachutes. And the second parachute is packed by a certified reserve parachute packer person. He's licensed, he or she's licensed. And for example, the person who packed the reserves at Carolina Sky Sports, he used to say that his reserves would open within 100 feet of the ground. Now, obviously, if you ever had to use your reserve, you owed the person who packed your reserve a bottle of whiskey or tequila or whatever. But never happened. I never had to worry about that. I saw reserve openings very rarely in 4 years of skydiving. Now, so that's a little bit about the reserve. It's a little bit about some of the safety stuff. Making sure you're jumping into a quality drop zone is always important. Look at their safety record, etc. Now, how does this work? How do you get into it? There's two primary ways to get into skydiving. One is called accelerated free fall. Usually it's just AFF for short. The AFF program, the way that works is you go to the drop zone, you go to a class, and it's a crazy long class. This, by the way, is not the way that I would recommend getting into skydiving, but it does work. Some people prefer it. So you go through this crazy class where you have to go through all the training and everything, so you know how to fly the canopy, land the canopy on your own. And then what happens is your first jump, when you jump out of the plane, it's almost effectively a solo jump. But the difference is, as you hop out of the plane, your canopy is opened right away, and you don't have you're not jumping at 10 or 15,000 feet. You're jumping at the 2 to 3 or 5 closer to the ground. So all you're doing is flying the canopy to the ground, landing on your own. You're not actually skydiving yet. So and then you have to do a couple of those, show that you can land safely and all those kinds of things, and then you go on your own. Let's go into what tandem is before I go into why my personal preference is tandem. Tandem, the way it works is, and this is the way I always describe it, you go to the drop zone, you watch a 30-minute video, sign away your life, and then 45 minutes later, you're on a plane jumping out of the plane. Now, the way that works is your instructor has a harness on, and that harness is set up to hook into a harness that the student is wearing, and the two of you are basically strapped together like a sandwich. And you jump out together. Now, the thing that's cool about this is not only is it just, only about 45 minutes, an hour before you're jumping out of a plane, depending on how busy the drop zone is, but also it's the fastest way for you to experience the overall experience of skydiving. And so you get the full free fall feeling. You get the full free fall experience. And then once you open the canopy, you also get the benefit of having your instructor's expertise to teach you how to fly the canopy as you're going down together. And you have them right there behind you because they can basically just talk right into your ear the whole way. So they're teaching you how to fly the canopy, they're teaching you how to land, all that stuff right there. It's a much more personal, I think it just helps destroy the learning curve way better. The way the tandem program works, you do 4 or 5 with your tandem instructor, then you do 4 or 5 together, and then after those, that's when you start your first solo series before you finally get on to the number of jumps you need to get your Class A license. I personally think, in my humble opinion, that tandem is the way to go. It lets you get to a point where when you go to the drop zone, you get the experience right away. If you decide you want to continue, your first jump counts. You just use it for the others, and you're not spending hours and hours and hours in a classroom for something that you may not ultimately enjoy doing. But that being said, after throwing what feels like half of the university out of an airplane, I will say this. 8 out of 10 people who went to the drop zone with me came back, and after they landed, they all said, 8 out of 10 said, I wish I'd brought my checkbook, because checkbooks was a thing at the time. They wanted to get right back on that plane and go again. That's how much fun they had. The other 2 generally said that was amazing. Like they almost everybody had these just crazy smiles on their faces. They were making the sounds, they were doing all the stuff and the whooshes and everything. And the other two were like so glad they did it, but it wasn't their thing and they weren't going to continue. Totally cool. Dude, 80% like want to go again after the first time. As far as being afraid of heights or being scared of, you know, all the different things that happen, I have taken people skydiving who were literally scared to jump off the bottom step of a staircase. That's how scared of heights they were. I have stories of people who said they were never going to do it. They were dating somebody who was a skydiver, and then after spending so much time at the drop zone, what happens is you realize all these people go up in a plane and then they all come back down fine. And so over time, I watched them just kind of get more comfortable with the idea, and then before they knew it, they were also throwing themselves out of an airplane. So that's why, you know, after 4 years of throwing so many people out of airplanes and just seeing the reactions and going through those experiences with them, I personally recommend the tandem approach, and why I also think that this is something that is totally worthwhile to experience in your lifetime if you have not had a chance to do so already. As part of the stories, I'll probably break up some of these stories into just groups of different things as I think about stuff that was fun, including, you know, my own first skydive experience as well. And before we wrap up the intro to skydive video, in addition to my logbook, I found my jumpsuit. That's what the getup is. This is my skydiving jumpsuit. As you can see, here we are, 27 years later. It still fits, don't hate me. But what this is all about aerodynamics and being streamlined for your jumps. So it's very tight fitting, and the actual grips here on the arms and the legs, the bright yellow spots, those are there so that when you're doing formation work, your teammates can grab onto you. Each time your teammates grab on, you earn a point. And so in formation relative work, it's called, as you're coming down, you see in the videos, you'll see people turning and doing points and stuff. The number of points you get and the complexity, that's how it all gets scored in skydiving competitions. When we're talking about relative work, there's lots of other ways to compete in skydiving as well. But that's what the jumpsuit is. Now, the interesting thing about the jumpsuit is the colors are a personal selection. So even then, I still had the art thing going, so I chose opposite colors on the color wheel. So that's why I got my blue and orange going. And then, you know, I wanted the handles to stick out a little bit so that people could really quickly see where they were grabbing. Now, my suit is a little bit loud, right? It's pretty bright. And combined with my canopy, which was all of the fluorescent, it was a fluorescent rainbow of color. And most people, whenever I walked up, were instantly giving me a hard time. Oh, dude, who brought the sun? Turn out the sun. So I got a lot of flack for my color choices, but that's all right. So anyways, this is the kickoff to the skydiving series. There won't be a ton of videos, but hopefully over time, I'll share some of those experiences so that, much like the people who would go to the drop zone who said they would never jump and just spent a bunch of time there, seeing people go up and come back down safely, all of a sudden even those people were like, yeah, you know, maybe this isn't a bad idea. And then before they knew it, they also were throwing themselves out of an airplane. Sweet, take it easy.